Maybe not. Transition
Anybody need a break?
by Jamie Edmonds.
All right. I'll try and be at least as positive and uplifting and hopeful as Don was. My talk's on the transition. Was, for those of you that are familiar with the movement, that's always kind of the repetitive question that comes up all the time. Well, what about the transition? How do we get from here to there? And I wanted to start out with a short clip from a video from the premiere of ZDAY Moving Forward from a press conference that Peter Joseph did with Jacques Fresco, and they were asking him about the transition. So you look around, you look at the amount of resources that we're using up, the garbage that's piling up, the people that are going hungry. How did we get to that wonderful city back there from here? And he had a few things to say about it, and then I want to touch on it a bit more as well. Let's see if I can use this to make this work.
What do you think of this?
Well, there's two angles of transition. There's the physical transition, and then there's the cultural transition. And on both sides, the latter is much more complex. The physical transition, the rebuilding of buildings, this is all technically feasible. It's provably and scientifically concrete that we can do much more advanced things with extreme high efficiency. So the physical transition isn't a problem for me at all. It's the cultural transition. It's the people that are locked into the system. It's the people that identify so dogmatically that they feel that anything that alters their sense of identity is an attack on them. And this often, social systems, people identify with their social systems. They want to believe that their social systems are for them, just like they want to believe that their governments are for them, just like they want to believe that marketing and advertising or corporations like Apple Computer has a huge following of people that identify strongly. Same thing goes for corporation and social system. So we have the free market, we believe in freedom and democracy, and these words have resonant meanings with people. Whatever you want to define them as, it's a whole different subject because of the ambiguity of what people are conditioned to believe those words mean. Point being, the cultural transition is by far the most difficult. We have to educate people on what it means to be sustainable and get them to understand the need to identify with that for their own purposes and the reasoning of their own survival, the survival of their kids and their grandkids. To give a more concrete definition of time span or technical transition, once you've had enough people that believe in this, then you begin to slowly change certain environments and certain regions to more sustainable practices not only regarding the industry, but also what people actually do, what people actually engage in. And then slowly the systems will shift, and then hopefully that will spread. One more thing I'll add, though, is that there will be a social breakdown, which has already been underway for many decades, which people don't seem to reconcile, don't really pay attention to it, such as the continual doubling of poverty, the tremendous suffering, the extreme class division, the onslaught of all sorts of mental diseases, neuroses, and many things covered in the film as a result, literally, of this system. These things are eventually going to come to a head, where people will step back and finally say, we can't do this anymore. This is affecting all of our health. We're suffering tremendously at multiple levels. We have energy deficiencies, we have health deficiencies, and all of these things will come to a head to an effect where I think eventually, slowly, it will permeate most consciousness and people will wake up and realize that we have to do something new. Either that happens or we're going to move into something much, much worse, frankly.
Right, and that's, I think, the area that I'd like to talk about. How then would the movement encourage people to
Get in front of that.
to get in front of it or get behind it?
I feel I'm a big influence. My big influence, I say this, people find it cliche, is the American Civil Rights Movement, because it actually did work to a certain effect. It was allowed to work, if you will, because of the fact that so many people got behind it. The power is in critical mass. I don't believe that politicians would do anything. To get into a position of political power, you have to navigate a certain path that automatically creates a void for challenging the system, to put it in a long-winded sense. you have to orient the status quo to even be in a position to have a relationship with the status quo. That's just the inevitable motion. You can't possibly have any, and if they do get in power, something will remove them from it, and that's been historically true, or they're demeaned. And the few people that are in power today in the Congress of the U.S., Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, that have hints of trying to change things for the better, they get more attacked than any other politician out there. They're stifled in their communication. So the change will not come from any political system, and it certainly won't come from a corporate system. You're not going to see corporations magically try to be actually sustainable because, as I point out in the film, it is mathematically impossible for them to do so. The entire financial system is driven by consumption, and the more consumption, the better. Therefore, sustainability is intrinsically thrown out the window. So, and that's just one facet of it. So the change will come from critical mass of people understanding, people that will hopefully grassroots level through the Zeitgeist Movement chapters globally. It will rise up. It will become dominant in the sense that everyone knows about it. And eventually those institutions, those status quo institutions will have to step back and say, okay, we can no longer ignore this gigantic global movement. And that will be a peaceful type of interaction. Compromises will be made. And if things, I'll just add one more thing, if things don't materialize and things continue to get worse and worse and worse, if things don't operate in a relatively rational way, where people are paying attention to each other, where the government say, okay, the United Nations, for example, says, okay, we're going to bring in this new organization to see what they have to say because they have hundreds of millions of people that follow them. If that doesn't happen, then I think certain acts of civil disobedience would be necessary.
Well, they're happening now.
There are, but on a global scale, not country specific. Civil disobedience on a global scale that if any actions are taken, they are presented globally. And this will, I think, one action like that to show that there was a power to do so would rattle this system to such an effect that I think it could be very, very positive to get people to finally want to listen to what we have to say in power.
But you take a look at all the austerity measures, that happened in Europe this past summer, and you see the protests in England, and you see the protests in Greece, and you see all that, you see it in the media, you see it, the images of the firebombing from the police and the students, just the street violence, that's occurring at an alarming rate all through Europe.
Absolutely.
And nothing is being done.
True.
Nobody cares.
Because
people look at the image, they don't see that it's a problem.
They're getting used to it. They're getting numb to this. What happens in society as the breakdown occurs is people just start to say, oh, that's the way it is. They just say, that's the way it is that we have protests. That's the way it is we have crime. Or that's the way it is we have poverty. And then generation after generation, it's more that's the way it is. Everyone just slowly accepts. Eventually, you have 4, 5, 6 billion people many decades from now starving. And they'll just say, oh, it's our natural resources. We can't afford, we just don't have enough resources. That's their conditioning to believe. And that's the way it is. So I don't advocate protest at all. I don't believe in war protest in a direct sense. I think it does something. I don't put it down. But I advocate actual action. So you're not going to see the Zeitgeist movement with signs held up in front of Congress or anywhere in any country. That's not the point. The point is to actually, if there is a need, to actually do something that causes an act. So to give a hypothetical, which I'm not advocating, by the way, to show the power of critical mass, if 50% of the U.S. population decided not to pay income taxes, there's no way the U.S. government can prosecute all of these people.
I completely agree, and I've paid income taxes for 10 years.
So the point being is critical mass is, once the masses come together and the strategy of divide and conquer is finally nullified, which has been with us for centuries and centuries, that's how you divide, that's how you control people, divide them. Once the artificial boundaries are overridden by this core necessity of life, the life ground necessity that is talked about, life value analysis that John McMurtry describes, which is essentially implying exactly what the Demons Project is about, then people will come together and realize that we have to work to preserve resources, we have to work to create a stable environment for the benefit of everyone, we have to work to create equality, because of the evidence I showed by Richard Wilkinson, a stratified, divided society is one of the most unhealthy societies you can possibly have and causes a vast spectrum of disease and illness. It's scientifically proven in that sense, social science. I'm not going to say it's a technical science, but right now, all stratified societies, the more stratified, the worse their health is overall. And that is something that has to be recognized. We can't have a society that is so unhealthy when we know it's unhealthy. And hopefully people will begin to understand that and want to work towards something that actually is in line with nature and align with what it takes to actually have a healthy society.
As far as moving steps forward, like the city, the whole design of the city as it's presented seems really worthwhile, but also perhaps expensive in the first iteration, come in transition from what we've got now into, it would be one thing like once there's 50 of those cities and people are living in a different mindset, a different system, for those to regenerate is one. How do you get the first one? But what can people start doing so it's not purely ideas, but practice? Because what people I think respond at a local level, what people respond to is a better option, an actual better option. They experience as a better experience. You'll win over that many more people because, so it might not be the full city the first time. It might be aspects of it to build at a community level, to build towards. So like,
I'll wait till you do Amazon. I'll respond and I'll tell Jacques the question and he can respond as well. We're ready to go. Okay. With respect to what communities can do to try and inch towards this type of environment, especially with respect to the city systems, which are an intricate part to, I mean, you can, the depiction of the city system is only one depiction. I think Jacques Fresco would point out, but it's logical. And it just shows what you would do to make the most efficient, energy efficient, ease of transport. You make things localized. These are very common things. And yes, I do believe that people could do this on a local level in a lo-fi way. That's the term I use, lo-fi, as opposed to the hi-fi technical stuff that we point out. But it doesn't create the real resolution of applying technology in the highest order. That's all that has to be kept in mind.
So that's, he goes on to talk about the money, where's the money for all this? And that's a whole other conversation that Jacques goes into. But people need to learn about sustainability. People need to learn about how to bring some of this stuff to their daily lives. How do you reach people? How do you have that conversation about this train of thought, what's possible technically? How do you get their attention? How do you get them to weather this coming change when the robots have put everybody out of work? I'm a firefighter, retiring soon. They say you need a firefighter and a cop maybe once in your life, but you need a farmer 3 times a day. But you need to get to people that's going to give them something tangible. Then you can open up the conversation about the greater train of thought. So one of the programs that started in the UK called the Transition Movement is looking at, okay, globally, domestically we passed peak oil in the 70s, which is the most amount of oil we're going to have. We're on the downward side of that curve now. It's getting harder to find, it's getting more expensive to bring out of the earth. We're getting into the tar sands and the oil shale and all the tight oil and stuff like that. And globally, it peaked about 2010. So, like the curve that Don was showing, the cost of that is going like this. It's not going to level out. It's not going to go back down again. That little blip that we saw recently with Saudi Arabia, playing around with the oil prices, that's a slight anomaly. You're going to be paying, $10 for a gallon of gas here pretty quickly. What's going to happen to how you live, eat, get around, all that kind of stuff when oil goes up to $200, $300 a barrel? Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Russia, Iran, they all have 100 years more oil than we do. So they can float that while. They can drive the price down to $40 a barrel just to drive out all the competition that are trying to bring tight oil to the market at $65 a barrel. Well, if they can't sell it for more than $40, $50 a barrel, all those people go belly up, and then all their competition goes away. So the transition movement looks at that is a reality that we're going to have to deal with. How do we transition into a more sustainable, renewable lifestyle ahead of the dystopian Mad Max scenario that is in all the horror movies, right? Where people are stockpiling canned goods and ammunition and they're killing each other over a can of beans. There's a better way to do it. There's a lot of great existing technology that exists out here. You can check out some of it in the back with the hydroponic system. There's a lot of way to use the current technology to create abundance. And that's what we in the transition movement are working on. Specifically, there's a program called Transition Streets. And it's a neighbor-to-neighbor group. You get together 6 to 8 neighbors, and there's a workbook that we put together, and we're trialing it right now in the U.S. We're bringing the UK program over here, and there's 14 of us in the U.S. that are kind of going through the book and tailoring it for a U.S. audience, taking the U's out of the words and stuff like that, changing the metric to standards, things like that. What the book does is it looks at the 5 main areas that you need to have a good standard of living, good quality of life. Energy, water, food, transportation, and waste. How much energy do you need? How much energy do you use? How much energy do you waste? How can you be more efficient with any of that? What resources are available to help you improve on that? Is your house good for solar? Are there rebates available? Have you switched out your lighting for more efficient lighting? Have you done other things that can make it more resilient and more efficient? Same thing with water. Can you catch your rainwater? Can you store it? What's your return on the investment? If I spend a bunch of money on it, how am I going to pay it back? Right now, they say California has about a year of water left. I think we're going to be having water wars before we have oil wars if this drought keeps up. We're in our 12th year of climatological drought. And that means it takes 3 years of regular rainfall or above to make up for a year of below average rainfall. So they say it's the 4th year of drought, but really, if you look at climatologically, it's been about 12 years. And it's not just what we have here locally in the reservoirs. 85 to 90% of our water here in San Diego comes from outside of the county. San Francisco, Sacramento Delta, and Colorado River. We get about 8 to 10 inches of rain in a good year. We can catch that. We can reuse our gray water for irrigation and things like that. So the book is full of information, first of all, because it's an awareness-raising thing. You know how much water you actually use. You know how it's measured. You know where your water meter is. You know how much you're wasting. 16% of water use that's not used outside is wasted. Your toilet flapper valve leaks and it goes down the drain. You don't even know it's leaking. Water drips. How fast do those things add up? Where can you economize? What resources are available? What rebates or government programs or things from SDG&E or the water district, things like that can help you economize on that. Same thing with food. You know where your food comes from. Most food we eat here travels at least 3,000 to 4,000 miles to get to your plate. And the stores around here carry about 3 days worth of food. And look at San Diego County on a map of the United States. We're kind of in this little corner cul-de-sac of the U.S. here. And so when the manure finally hits the ventilator and things start going sideways, we're going to be in a world of hurt. The less resilient and sustainable we are. So the transition movement looks at all of those things. How do you get around? You got a big old clunker that gets about 10, 12 miles to the gallon, and you live in Temecula and you work downtown. When you're paying $20 for a gallon of gas, how's that going to work for you? Think about some of these things ahead of time. So part of it is awareness. Part of it is resources. The rest of the book is made up of all the resources available for you. Can you grow more of your own food? How hard is it? Super easy. How many resources does it take? Not a lot. You'd be really surprised. There's all kinds of techniques. Waste. How much waste do you generate? Tons. Some people's roommates even more, right? We throw away about 1 tall kitchen trash bag worth of trash.
He knows.
Now, we're down to 4. Everything organic gets composted. And there's all kinds of technology and resources for composting. For instance, using the bokashi method, which is using microbes and active bacteria to turn your organic garbage into pickles, basically, sauerkraut, kimchi, whatever. You get the microbes to do it, then you bury it in the ground, and instead of 4 months or 5 months for your average compost pile that you got to spend a lot of water keeping it wet, you got to turn it and all this kind of stuff, 2 weeks in the bokashi bucket, 2 weeks in the ground, and you can plant on it. Everything organic goes into paper towels, and because it's using organic active microorganisms, meat goes in there, dairy, fat, grease, oil, everything goes in there. Stuff you wouldn't normally compost because it doesn't get rancid. And so there's all kinds of things like that. There's all kinds of technologies. The purpose of the pilot group is to gather all those things up, put them in one big book, and make it available to everybody and anybody. And you get together with your neighbors, 6 to 8 households, and you meet 7 different times, 5 main chapters, those 5 areas. There's an introductory meeting and a wrap-up meeting at the end. And you also create community. You get to know your neighbors. And a lot of times in most neighborhoods in the United States, the garage door goes up, the car goes inside, the door goes down, you park your butt in front of the TV and you watch Fox News all night, and you don't know your neighbors beyond maybe one side on either side, right? What the people that did the program in the UK that we're bringing here, on average, saved about $900 a year. They reduced their carbon footprint by 1.3 tons, and they got to know their neighbors. They built a community. They started things like community gardens and book clubs and helped each other out watching the kids or carpooling or, hey, I'm going down to Costco. All you needed was a huge thing of toilet paper, but you could have your neighbor just pick it up while they're there instead of you getting in your car and driving all the way down there. We used to function like that when we were more of a tribal society. We relied on each other. We gave our gifts to the group freely, and we didn't keep score. We didn't say, okay, now thanks for doing that for me. I really appreciate it. Now I'm going to give you this piece of paper, and now I don't owe you anything anymore. We're separated now. We're done. What we're doing now is we're commodifying everything that we used to provide with each other, putting a price tag on it, and then using that to separate ourselves from each other. You're familiar with Charles Eisenstein and the sacred economy, the gift economy. That is kind of ties in with this a little bit. It's not part of the transition movement specifically, it's not part of the zeitgeist train of thought. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to show that if you can create abundance and you can produce stuff for zero marginal cost, you can give it away. And then it makes it impossible to sell it, and that is disruptive. Like, I'm making my own kombucha right now. We love kombucha. Like $4 a bottle. I can make it for 25 cents a bottle. And I'm getting 12 pints of it every 3 days. And it's coming out my ears. So I'm posting it on nextdoor.com that I've got kombucha to give away. Please come and get it. Well, how much is it? Free. Take 2 or 3 bottles, Well, what do you want for it? Nothing. Take it. And then the gifts come back around. People are dropping off calligraphy. They're learning calligraphy. So they made a bunch of little cards. And a guy helped me install a water filter and gave me a drill press. And, all kinds of stuff like that. Once you show people that you can produce abundance and you can build communities and you can help each other out, if you take care of everybody, then when things go sideways, the pirates aren't coming over the wall with the automatic weapons trying to take away your canned goods. Provide for everybody's needs. Realize we're all future before we wipe out this wonderful planet's ability to protect and provide for us. Planet doesn't do anything. 2 shits about us. Planet will be fine. We got to worry about us being able to live on this planet. In about 10 billion people, and by 2020 or so, it's going to level out at about 12.3 billion people by 2100. So it's not a resource problem, it's a distribution problem. We can grow a lot of food. We can move around a lot more efficiently than we do now, but not if we rely on the inefficiency of the market system to put a price tag on this thing. Let's start taking care of each other now. Thanks. And I'm starting a 501c3 to work on this locally. I've already been talking to local politicians about it to get some funding, and you'll be hearing more about it. There's a national rollout of transition streets in May. So look for me on the news. Yeah.
Going back to those 5 things you mentioned, you said energy, water, food, waste, and what's the other?
Energy, water, food, waste, and transportation. How we get around.
Oh, okay. I have.
And there are some flyers back there, but if you didn't get one, I've got more.
Yeah, where's Donna? And